Welcome to the Author's Corner with H.D. Campbell. For over 10 years, giving you the best of reviews, features, and more with the surprises too. All for you, the author. Now kick off your shoes and enjoy the show with your host, me, author H.D. Campbell. Welcome to another special Author's Corner SLAY edition. As always, I'm your host, H.D. Campbell. Today's episode, I have a 5-way interview with 5 different women. All have written vampire anthologies for the new book SLAY that came out last week. You need to get it. I mean, they're giving all their own take on the vampire anthology, the whole vampire lore. These are different stories. So if you're into vampires and you want to hear different stories not from the norm, you want to pick up SLAY. I'm serious. This is not just me hyping up authors. I mean, these are people taking the vampire lore from everything from ancient Egypt all the way from Africa to, you just got to meet these guys. These guys are going to be so awesome. And during the show, we talk about everything and also from nerddom and everything. So I'm going to put a little my nerd spin on it. And because, as a kid, for my characters, I used to write bios. Now, here's the secret. Secret to my bios for my characters. I actually stole the actual bio thing from 3 sources: the who's who of the DC universe, the who's who of the Marvel universe, as well as G.I. Joe. I basically took all those bios, real name, group affiliation, legal status, all that stuff. So for today, I'm also going to have like a little bio for each of the authors that are on my show today. I'm going to do everything from their website to little facts about them, so forth and so forth. So, here's the first fact. Michele Tracy Berger is a professor, a writer, a creativity coach, and a pug lover. Her main love is writing speculative fiction, though she is also known to write poetry and creative nonfiction as well. Her short fiction, poetry, and creative nonfiction has appeared or is forthcoming in 100-Word Story, Glint, Thing Magazine, Blood and Bourbon, Fire Magazine, the Black Speculative Fiction, Flying South, Oracle Fine Arts Review, Carolina Woman, Miss, The Feminist Wire, West North Carolina Woman, and other various themes and anthologies. Her science fiction novella, Re and You, about a mysterious virus transmitted through an everyday hair care product, Natural Hair Relaxer, was recently published by Falstaff Books. Much of her work explores psychological horror, especially through the issues of race and gender. Get to know Michele Berger at micheleberger.wordpress.com.
By Late Murder at 10 by H.D. Campbell. Former investigative reporter Mark Alexander thought his life hit a slump when a mass shooting results in the murder of a controversial news anchor. Can Mark get out of his head long enough to crack this case? Well, I'm not going to tell you. You'll have to get your own copy of Late Murder at 10 on Amazon.com and coming soon to your favorite bookstore. Coming soon, the second printing of the Sergeant Wise Guy Chronicles, reintroducing you to a special agent, Sergeant Wise Guy, the government's top strategics and agent with a very sarcastic tongue. A former ranger, he heads up a team of specialists taking care of missions too big or too messy or other agents don't want to handle. His first mission takes him to Paris, where a stolen Cold War nuclear warhead was discovered. While discovering the warhead's origin, a lost dead love resurfaces. Can Sergeant Wise Guy resolve both before the secret plans for the warhead is complete? Well, check out the second printing of the Sergeant Wise Guy Chronicles, coming soon.
My first group interview. How are you guys doing?
Really?
Doing good.
Fine, thank you.
Doing great.
All right. So you all are great sci-fi and superhero writers and everything. Tell me a little bit about what each of you write.
Well,
Start with Nicole.
Start with me.
Just call somebody's name.
Okay, I'm gonna start from the top to the bottom. Let's start with Penelope.
Okay.
All right. I write sci-fi, fantasy, horror, erotica, all of it kind of like a mishmash. I like to do, the cross-genre type of writing. I've been doing it for a while now, but only really seriously recently, in the past 5 years, I guess, doing it seriously, and like for the past 2 years, really seriously. So, yeah.
Awesome. Samantha?
Hi, I'm Samantha Bryant. I write the Menopausal Superhero series and anything else that people will pay me to write.
Yay!
I like variety.
Yes.
I love that. What about Alicia? I love your little Wonder Woman background there.
Hey everybody, I'm Alicia McCalla and I write Black speculative science fiction and fantasy with dark undertones for people who want to see Black women kicking butt, right?
Yeah.
And Michele?
Hi everyone, I'm Michele Tracy Berger and I write across the speculative fiction universe. So everything from modern fantasy to urban fantasy to sci-fi, and I feel like everything I write though has an edge or an element of horror.
Awesome. And let's get to the woman who brought us all together.
Hey, my name is Nicole Kurtz and I write cyberpunk mysteries. I write fantasy mysteries and weird westerns. I also run Mocha Memoirs Press.
All right. I have an idea, by the way, I want to run by you guys. Since we're doing this, I want to give you guys the whole hour of the show. Is that awesome?
That is fantastic.
So I'm going to give you guys the whole, because plus I'm also into sci-fi and horror. And I love all that. So
Right.
let's chat. So for each of you guys, what started off your love for sci-fi? Let's start with Nicole first.
Oh, my love for sci-fi started by watching Star Trek, the original series, with my father when I was like 10 or 12 years old, and just being really hooked in by seeing Lieutenant Uhura on the bridge and like, oh my gosh, and the fantastic storytelling that went on in the original series just really kind of made me interested in the future, the what if question, and how it was being answered. And so I mean, I can go further back to Where the Wild Things Are, right? Which is basically, right, fantasy, right? Max gets in his boat, he goes across, and he becomes, king of all the wild things. And it is totally fantasy because they're monsters, and he somehow makes them all follow him with his terrible roar. Really, I think I've been in love with science fiction and fantasy my whole life.
Awesome. What about Samantha?
I think, like Nicole, it'd be hard to pin it down. Like, I can't remember not being in it. I had a couple different gateway drugs. I think my uncles are maybe largely to blame, my mother's brothers. Most of them are not very much older than me. Like, there's one that's only like 8 years older than me, and so they were children beside me, and they were who I was looking up to, and they passed me books and shared stories with me, and they were all a bunch of big nerds. So there you go. And then the bookmobile lady definitely was a dealer for me in science fiction. She was so pleased to find a little girl who wanted those kinds of stories, and she just, every time that they came through my neighborhood, she had like 4 or 5 books for me. And then Tom at Tom's Book Nook, which was a used bookstore in my town that kept a box of comic books on the floor. You could get them for $0.10 a piece. And so I read a little bit of everything and all of nothing.
Martha, you sitting up and describing my childhood. The bookmobile, the comic books, oh man. Anyway, let's get to Penelope.
When I was a kid, like Nicole, mine was Star Trek, but I watched it with my grandfather, who was a really big science fiction fan, and he could draw, really, really well. He could draw like that. Was so science fiction comic books and things of that ilk. So, I started out, with, sitting there with my grandfather, and I was about 5, watching Star Trek. And then as we got older, things like Night Gallery, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, all those things. By that time, I guess most of them were in syndication. But that's what, started me. And my sisters and I are all big horror fans. All our lives, we got with MT Graves, Creature Feature, all those shows like that. We read Hitchcock, we did ghost stories, everything. So when we were growing up, that was just the food, that's the brain food that we grew up with. All science fiction, horror, and fantasy in our household. Everybody was big readers. So that was, our starting point. And I was lucky because, I had older sisters and younger sisters, and we all were into it. We all read it. We were all really big television films. We'd even go see the B-rated films, they come out at the local theater we could walk to. So, yeah, that was just a huge part of my growing up was science fiction, fantasy, and horror.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And comic books. Ugh.
Yeah, mix it with comic books. Yeah, have the comic books.
Yeah. Big. Even now, my husband and I are both big comic book collectors. So, I started out young, Superman's, DC. By the time, I was older, get to the Marvel, comics. And, we were that kind of, family.
Before I get to Alicia, I just want to say you guys all look like a Justice League right here, too. Speaking of which, you guys all look Justice League. But Alicia, go ahead.
Oh my goodness. So I'm trying to think of when sometimes in life we have these waking moments, and I feel like with science fiction and fantasy, my grandparents were instrumental in helping me to develop these moments where I just remember the magical experience of loving something. And so the first movie I remember was Star Wars, and my grandmother took us and me and my uncle, and we were excited, and we went to see the movie, and I was like, I want to be Princess Leia, scared as hell of Darth Vader, right? And I remember after we saw Star Wars, I came home and I got in bed. I said, Mommy, I'm too scared to go to sleep. Darth Vader might get me. Because Vader was scary back then. But I also really, really was that kid who did superheroes. So I love Wonder Woman. And I don't know if you guys remember Electro Woman and Dyna Girl.
Oh my God. Sid and Marty Krofft.
Electro Woman and Dyna Girl.
Don't judge me, but I got the DVD set.
All right.
Sid and Marty Krofft, man, they almost ruined. They did ruin Saturday morning cartoons.
Yes. And I was a big Justice League fan, the whole thing. So I believe I started my fandom pretty doggone young. And it's funny because I'm from Detroit. I'm straight hood rat. But you know what? It didn't even matter. That stuff was cool to me. And so I love it all. Star Trek too. Lieutenant Uhura. So I don't know if my story is any different from everybody else's, I'm not sure. But I just found that love of imagination and, and I will say this one last thing, because my granddad, he worked for the IRS and he got his bachelor's degree from Wayne State in philosophy. And back then in the 70s, philosophy was how they got into those first computer degrees. And so he became a manager in the IRS for the computer department, and he loved science fiction and fantasy. So when I was a teenager, he would bring me like Piers Anthony and Douglas Adams, and so I was like reading these like books and like devouring them. So between the shows, the TV shows and the movies, and then Granddad hooking me up with like, you know, that deep sci-fi stories, I was all in, man. I was hook, line, and sinker. So 20, 30 years later, or maybe 40 years later, I shouldn't say that, but you know, right?
You're so cool. It took 30 years for Alicia to accept her calling as writer of unusual stories, always writing edgy tales to push the envelope. She learned to hide her violent, controversial, heart-pumping, horrific, and tragically romantic stories from family and friends. Alicia writes for both new adults and adults with her brand of multicultural superheroes, dark fantasy, paranormal, and horror. Her stories always include strong women who fight back, sometimes to the death. Alicia's influences include Octavia Butler, L.A. Banks, Faith Hunter, Patricia Biggs, and Laura K. Hamilton. Alicia is an activist in the movement towards diversifying science fiction and fantasy. She created the first State of Black Science Fiction 2012 blog tour, is an active member of the State of Black Science Fiction Facebook group, and has a Pinterest account. She actively curates topics related to Black warrior women, Black science fiction, Black speculative fiction, and more. Alicia is a native Detroiter who currently resides in Metro Atlanta. Alicia recently lost her beloved son who served as a Navy officer. His memory keeps her pushing forward. She currently works as a full-time writer and enjoys spending time with her husband. She's currently working on a new superhero series and looks forward to releasing the series soon. Her adult series mixes African-American women's fiction with dark fantasy. Check out the African Elemental series. Sign up to www.aliciamccalla.com for free downloads, e-updates, sneak peeks, and coupons. It's the Author's Corner's first contest. November 2nd, win copies of Small Town Love and Small Town Faith by author Michele Tracy Berger on Kindle. The enter is simple. Just inbox me your email address on either Facebook or Twitter and put the words contest right next to it. Deadline is October 30th. And then after Michele Tracy Berger's interview on November 2nd's Author's Corner, I will announce the winner. Those on my mailing list automatically entered. It's the Small Town Love Contest with Michele Tracy Berger. Thank you, and as always, let your writing fuel your spirit.
Just who is author H.D. Campbell? He's the multi-gene author who can take you on several trips at once. With H.D. Campbell, you can have a romance, you can track a killer, or even stop an international incident. For 30 years and still writing, H.D. Campbell will take you on trips you've never been before. Learn more about him by logging on to hdcampbell3.com or check him out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and LinkedIn. Read his rewrites of How to Lose a Black Woman and Late Murder at 10 with a new title coming soon. And as always, let your writing fuel your spirit.
Oh my goodness, I definitely am among my people because I feel like there's so many resonances. I will take you all the way back to Lost in Space.
Oh, yes!
Oh,
Absolutely.
That was my jam. I mean,
Danger, Will Robinson.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was obsessed. I was so obsessed with that. I actually believe that I was Will Robinson's sister, and my mother, bless her soul, just supported my creativity, and she would set a place setting. I made her set a place setting for Will Robinson because he was going to come down and get me, you know, like he was just part of the family. And so she did stop when she was serving lamb, and she's like, you know what? He does not need a serving of lamb. He kind of eats in space. So, but my mother was very indulgent of that. And I love Lost in Space, and I love the Bionic Woman. You know, really seeing strong female characters was so powerful. And I think Penelope said this, my mother actually, so she wasn't so much into sci-fi, but she was into horror. So there was a lot of, in terms of like movie consumption and TV consumption, Night Gallery and all of that great stuff. And then, I saw Star Wars, which was obviously really formative for my experience. I didn't identify that much with Princess Leia, but the sweep of it and the scope of it and the imagination of it was definitely really powerful. And I would say in terms of reading, I actually didn't come to reading sci-fi and fantasy probably until my teens. And then it was more like epic fantasy. And so it sort of was, but I was always kind of devouring the sci-fi media and the horror media.
Well, like I said earlier, you guys are sort of like the Justice League of sci-fi writers. But I do want to get serious just for a second. You guys are a brand new genre. We always have the guys who write sci-fi. We always have black men, white men. But this is a powerful bunch of women, period, writing sci-fi. How does that feel? We'll start with Samantha. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I'm super excited. I mean, we do have some men in this anthology. They're just not with us here today.
Right.
So we are inclusive. But, I get to read enough of that other kind of stuff. And that's what I was excited about SLAY. Even before I knew that Nicole took my story, I was excited to just get to read this anthology. Now I get to be in it. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Now, I guess my next thing is I want to talk about this anthology. Penelope, let's start with you. Let's start with your part. First I'll start with Nicole because I want to know about the anthology. And I want to know everyone's parts in the anthology.
I love your energy and excitement, Henry.
Right.
We're just loving it.
Well, number one, like I've been telling people recently, I've been 10 years on this show. And then, very seldom I get to talk. I mean, I talk about all types of genres, but I'm a huge sci-fi superhero fan. And then I'm talking to 5 ladies who are actually into it, and this is just so awesome. So that's why you guys don't get an entire hour show to yourselves. So,
hey, I want to just say this: girl power. We were on. Right?
Definitely women power there. Yep.
So, Nicole, start off by telling us about your anthology, and I'm going to have everyone talk about that part.
Okay, so SLAY, Stories of the Vampire Noir, is an anthology of Black vampire and slayer stories, essentially, from all over the African diaspora. Excuse me. This is what happens when I don't get my coffee early. So one of the things that for me was I really liked L.A. Banks' Vampire Huntress series, starting with Minion. And when she died unexpectedly, it kind of left a void. Not to say that there weren't authors already writing Black vampires and Black vampire hunters. There are, and there were. They still are. But they didn't kind of capture L.A. Banks' attention to the authenticity of urban life. They're either romantic or they're heavily drawing on Stoker's European versions of vampires. And so I was just thinking like Kai Leaks is one of the contributing authors, and she would often lament on Facebook, oh gosh, I really miss L.A. Banks. And I had the idea, I was like, well, it would be really cool if we had a whole anthology of just Black vampires and slayers. And so to kind of fill that gap. And so so I put out a call. I was like, it'd be really great if someone had a publishing company and could do that. So,
that would be Nicole.
The whole mission of my company is to amplify underrepresented and marginalized voices in speculative fiction. Particularly, we do a lot of women in horror of focus. And so I was like, this would be something that we could do. And so we did our Indiegogo. Unfortunately, it was right at the beginning of a pandemic. So
I don't know if you guys know. There's an author from Chicago named James Gordon. He's a poet, and he's a big comic book guy like I am. And he actually made a point as far as he have a. He said, "Well, I'm just gonna quote him. It says." Everyone needs a Justice League. I'm going to keep referencing it. I'm sorry. And for your anthology, you got quite the Justice League here. I'm sorry. And I'm loving this. So I want to talk to first Penelope. Tell me about your contribution to the anthology.
All right. Well, mine kind of like dovetails in with my magnum opus, which is Renfields, the Chronicles of Renfields. And the Chronicles of Renfields is actually, cutting to the chase. It is about Renfields, who are, when I thought about it many years ago, the story Renfield, who's from Bram Stoker's Dracula, the guy in the insane asylum, goes nuts, acolyte of the Count. So what if it wasn't just one of them? What if he was an outlier, just a crazy one? And there's a whole family of them. So in my story, it's a whole family of Renfields going back, millennia and millennia and millennia, who've taken care of these revenants or the vampires who live in this world that they call the paradox because they're not from here. But in order to survive here, in order to get servants, basically they bred with regular human beings and created this hybrid people called Renfields. Now, of course, this is, analogous. It is an allegory pretty much about the African-American experience as being hybrids in a place that, where you have two parts of you, neither of which accepts you. So you kind of have to go on your own. And to a great extent, as I talk to other people, sometimes it's actually, kind of like the immigrant experience. Some of the immigrants are like Ellis Island immigrant experience and earlier and later in the United States. So that concept of being a part of a whole that sometimes does not accept the fact of your existence, but mostly African Americans. I think we are, ones who have that kind of background. So Renfields is like its own separate hierarchy, its own empire that exists, parallel to our time periods, whatever they are, running their own society, running their own things, but having to interact with this world. And in my story, which is called Unfleemed, it is about that story of how the prefect, the head of the Renfield Empire, meets with that Renfield, who is the individual from Bram Stoker's Dracula, and how it is that our Renfields interact with that Renfield and Dracula and his coming to London.
I love that. You create your own mythology, and I love that. So, I'm just going to go to Samantha. I'm too excited. Go, Samantha, next.
So my story is quite a bit different than Penelope's. Mine's set in Egypt during the time of the 10 plagues, which is one of the religious stories that scared me the most, like my whole life, like from when I first heard it when I was a child. The idea of a God that would go around killing children to punish a bad man. Oh my gosh, that just got me so hard. And the thing about the story, at least as I learned it as a child, is there isn't any detail. We know that the children were killed, but not exactly how or by whom, other than it says his destroyer, as in God's destroyer. So I decided who she was, and she's Diani Hatiri, and she was beaten to death because she had a girl child, and then she woke up and was called. And it was a story that gave me chills to write, and I hope that's what it will do for readers as well.
Oh my God, it will. Because it totally freaked me out. It really did. And it's not a very long story, but it that's one of the stories that really is one of the scarier stories.
Right.
We have, there's the gambit. We have like a YA story. We have like very serious futuristic stories. But Samantha's, there's a handful of those that are really scary, hard type stories. We have a lot of kick butt heroine stories. But Samantha's is in that group of like 6 that are really scary vampire stories.
I'm scarier than I look.
Yeah, I'm ready to read that.
That story freaked me out.
See, before I get to the next author, I have to get this book. Before we get to the end, you gotta tell us how to get this book, because I'm ready for it. Samantha Bryant is a middle school Spanish teacher by day and a mom and novelist by night. That makes her a superhero all the time. Her secret superpower is finding lost things. When she's not writing or teaching, Samantha enjoys time with her family, watching old movies, baking, reading, and going places. Her favorite gifts are tickets to makers of just about anything. You can find the Menopausal Superhero series from Falstaff Books on Amazon or request it at your favorite independent or big box bookstore. You can find her online on her blog, right here at SamanthaDunaway@blogspot.com, on Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, or on the Falstaff book page on Instagram. Like, I'm actually ready to do a review on it right now. But let's get to Alicia first. Alicia.
Okay. My short story is called The Last Vampire Huntress. And basically, it's a story of a vampire huntress finding a bloody butcher knife note stuck in her apartment door. And she's got to stop her vampire ex-boyfriend from killing all the hunters in her guild, or she'll have to face this terrible prophecy. My main character is named Kendra, and she's actually a daughter of Oshun, and her family totem is the vulture. So I like to use West African mythology in lots of my stories. Not sure if it's scary, but it's definitely tragically romantic, right?
No, it is. It is. It's one of the. It is, and it's one of those stories where you're just like, you feel for the protagonist in ways that you're like, oh man, this is such a difficult choice. This is such a hard thing that they have to do, and it kind of has like a K-drama feel that you know it's not going to end well. But you're like, oh, if she can just, darn, the stars are not going to align for her to do what she. Damn it! So.
Let's get to Michele.
Well, I just have to say, when Nicole invited us to be in this anthology, it was such an honor. And as someone who actually did not have a lot of vampire lore and history, it was just so exciting to work on something new. So my story is called Blood Saviors. And I start with this, it really revolves around this question of, what would someone be willing to do to save their own kind? And would a group of vampires be willing to sacrifice another group of magical beings to save their own kind? And so in this world, it's urban fantasy. There's vampires, there's humans and fae. None of them get along. And there are rules that govern their experience. And so our main character, Shonda, is sent, she's a vampire. She's an African-American vampire. She's sent by the Vampire Council to investigate what seems to be weird shenanigans coming out of this Glamour Day Spa owned by another vampire. So humans go into the Glamour Day Spa very old, and they come out looking very young. And they know, the vampires know, there's some kind of magical experience underfoot, but they don't know what it is. So Shonda goes undercover, and she finds that the vampire who owns the spa is kind of a mad scientist, and basically has trapped a group of magical beings. And there is also a virus that's going on that's killing a lot of vampires. So Sean has to make a moral choice about, there's something that this vampire is doing related to using the blood of these magical creatures to perhaps cure the virus, which would help vampires. So does she make that choice to let those enslaved beings do that for the vampires?
Oh, wow. One thing I want to say is, you all five of you guys have created your own mythologies, which means, and I mean, no one is like the other. How do you guys come up with your own mythologies? I mean, each and every one of you create your own world. Anyone can answer first.
I think the reason that I did is because I was always painfully aware when I was young that being an African-American woman, African-American girl, was a very different thing. I told my husband, we have four children, that when you watch television commercials back in the day, and even up to recently, in the past when my children were young, that whenever children are playing a game on a commercial, at the very end of the game, so watch and see, it's always a white boy that says, "I win." And he's like, "You are such a," he said, you really got home in on these things. I said, "No," I said, "Really, watch." And he started watching with me. And he said, "Oh my gosh, it's true. Only the white boy gets to say, 'I win.'" And then in one commercial, the white boy he did not win the game. The white girl wins the game. And at the end, he says, "You win." She didn't even get to say, "I win," after she won. So I said, we live in a time, I'm very painfully aware. And because, I mean, I was, one of those, quote, unquote, little smart kids when I was really young. I started reading very early. My parents were very, didactic about, learning and education and things of that ilk. But also, I did see the difference because, I was a girl. I liked many things that people would say, or things like the boy things, like, I wanted rockets, I wanted erector sets, I wanted, things. But, it's like, it was like, so there's pulling teeth to get, Hot Wheels and things of that ilk, because there's a mindset as to what it is that girls are supposed to like and girls are supposed to be. Now, because I was in a family of all girls, what ended up happening is, like my mom would say, well, they're boys' toys and girls' toys, right? So if you go to the store and you buy a truck, then that's a girl's toy because now it belongs to a girl. So this is the mindset that I grew up with. So, when I approach the world, it's like I'm always seeing now how is it that we find our place in the world, as Black women, as women, as it's a very strange conundrum we find ourselves in right now. We are in a renaissance because of the internet, because we've had gatekeepers for so long that get to form what it is that we as Black people, we as women get to see about ourselves, who it is that we are, how we react to certain things. That we don't want to be the damsel in distress. We want to be the person that's doing the saving. And maybe not in the same way that, our male writer counterparts think about saving and what that means. But no one, prior to this gives us an opportunity to tell those stories unless we're telling it in the way that the gatekeepers want us to tell it.
Right.
This truly is a renaissance right now. We are living it. We're going through it right now. We probably don't believe it. Like I said, the world is changing right now under our feet.
Penelope Flynn writes and creates 3D illustrations, art, and character designs for mixed genre speculative fiction with elements of fantasy, paranormal, science fiction, magical realism, urban fantasy, Afrofuturism, erotica, suspense, and Afrofuturism. You can find out more about all of her fiction at penelopeflynn.com.
Have you seen The Author's Corner with H.D. Campbell? It's the best show you're not watching. Every week we have authors, editors, artists, and others from various industries. There are 3 ways to watch Author's Corner, primarily on our YouTube channel, HD Television, on our HD Television Facebook page, and on our media page at www.hdcampbellmedia.com. It's The Author's Corner with H.D. Campbell. Check it out weekly. And as always, let your writing fuel your spirit. And God bless you.
It's the Author's Corner's first contest. November 2nd, win copies of Small Town Love and Small Town Faith by author Michele Tracy Berger on Kindle. The enter is simple. Just inbox me your email address on either Facebook or Twitter and put the words contest right next to it. Deadline is October 30th. And then after Michele Tracy Berger's interview on November 2nd's Author's Corner, I will announce the winner. Those on my mailing list automatically entered. It's the Small Town Love Contest with Michele Tracy Berger. Thank you, and as always, let your writing fuel your spirit.
I mean, that's the whole point of my publishing company. It's like we're 11 years old now. And so when I started, I was tired of that. I was tired of, we're not able to identify with your character. Right. She's a Black female in DC, but you can identify with a shape-shifting tiger. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
And so it was like,
exactly.
Samantha's heard me tell that on panels before. And so the whole purpose of Mocha Memoirs is to produce work that is underrepresented, that people may have a smaller readership or may go against the grain of what is popular coming out of traditional, and I use that term loosely, out of traditional publishing houses. And so I think that for a lot of us here, creating those different worlds that we live in and that we're the protagonists and superheroes of, that we are the reigning house, right? That we are in control, right? We're the undercover spy. And a lot of the stories in SLAY, there are 28 stories. A lot of them are by women. And that's because a lot of women sent in stories. But I had to work to find the men, right? Because a lot of men didn't send in stories, but a lot of women did. And because of that, a lot of the women or like author stories are very different stories. Like L.A. Moore's story, it's about an organization or a sorority of women, mothers, like a group of women friends and their daughters. And so they get together for these wine dates once a month. and they send their girls to the upstairs room. They rotate houses, and they have their wine party. And so when the girls get to be a certain age where they go through the change, right, the mother friends sent them down and discuss, okay, here's what the wine parties are really about. It is gorgeous.
I love that.
And a lot of there's like a KRS McIntyre story is about a vampire, is about family. A lot of the stories are about families and the impact of having a vampire in your family is. There's just, the stories in this collection are so, and I'm not just saying that because it's mine or I edited or I'm publishing it, but the stories from the women authors about vampires and slayers are very different from male vampire stories I've read before. Like the topics are very different. The impact emotionally is very different. It's just a very different, and I think that's because they are women or they identify as women. And so it changes a lot of that landscape.
You know,
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Right. And see, if you can actually take, and this is what all of you did, you guys can take the actual vampire story and turn it into fantasy, turn it into urban, turn it into sci-fi, turn it into, you know, almost biblical. You guys, excuse me, that's what I'm talking. You guys are so awesome with that. I'll tell you a quick story. My daughter right now is writing a fantasy book along those levels. And I almost thought about publishing her myself, but now that I'm talking to you guys, I think I might just send it to you. I mean, that's up to you, but I'm thinking of, because I just love the different types of storytelling. So my next, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, just to follow up on some of the points, there's so much innovation now in terms of across sci-fi, because readers are hungry for new stories, and there are more people. Gatekeepers have, in some ways, are shifting or changing, or we're just, you know, moving around the gatekeepers and creating new narratives. And like, I just want to also echo what Nicole was saying, in that that sense of, you know, a broader landscape to play in, and new kinds of people, and new themes, right? So the themes that are horrific to being in a gendered body as a woman translate differently, right? And thinking about also race and class. And so it is a really exciting and powerful time. And I want to echo that. And also, if people haven't read Sycorax's Daughters, which I know Nicole was published in, and maybe some other people in here, which is a kind of a large anthology of Black women of color writing across the horror genre. That's an excellent anthology. It came out a couple of years ago.
Yes, and it includes like poetry, stories, of course, and if I'm not mistaken, there's an essay or two in Sycorax Daughters as well. So it's kind of a comprehensive Black women horror text. So if you haven't read it or gotten it, it's definitely one of the things that should be on your reference shelf in your library.
You know, one thing that I wanted to share, I don't know if anybody else kind of have these things, because I like to echo what they also said, but you know, I took my DNA recently, and I was like 90% West African and Nigerian and Ghana, and me and my husband, we traveled to Ghana. But one of the things that I realized is that why is it that I understand, feel comfortable with Greek and Roman mythology, but I'm 90% West African, and I have no idea about West African mythology, right? And, you know, I think people get tired of being disassociated with themselves, you know, with the understanding of who and what they are. And so that becomes a sense of urgency, a sense of, you know what, I need to know who I am. You know, I need to express that. And so, you know, as creatives, we go out of our way to connect with those things like that are powerful. And so for me, I'm fascinated now with Mewu and Umoja and Oshun and even Egyptian Osiris. You see what I'm saying? But we want to take those stories and we want to flip them around and mix in who and what we are as African Americans, because I know me and Penelope had this conversation. You know, my grandmother's grandfather wrote his autobiography and he traced my family back to 1692, right? And so I am 6th, 7th generation American as well. So you don't get to tell me that I don't belong here. Exactly. I belong here, but I also have roots in West Africa. Absolutely. And so I don't know if that sense of agency is with others, but it definitely is with me.
Nicole Kurtz is an author, editor, and educator. She's a member of the Horror Writers of America, Sisters in Crime, and Science Fiction Writers of America. Her novels have been finalists in the Dream Realm Awards, Fresh Voices, and Epi Awards for Science Fiction. She's written for White Wolf's Vampire, the Masquerade's 25th Anniversary Anthology, Bram Stoker finalist in the horror anthology Cigarette's Daughter, and Cereal Box's The Vela Salvation series. Nicole has over 40 short stories published, as well as 11 novels and 3 active speculative mystery series. You can not only support her work via Patreon, you can check out her work at NicoleGivensKurtz.net.
Do you need editing and formatting services, promotion, or do you need a press kit? Let H.D. Campbell Productions put together a package to suit your needs. Let us handle your promotion, editing, press kits, photography service, and a lot more. We even do custom videos and videography. To learn more, log on to www.hdcampbell3.com or email us at hdcampbell3@msn.com for a free brochure. You can also contact us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and LinkedIn. We guarantee professional services at reasonable prices. Check us out, and as always, let your writing fuel your spirit. By Late Murder at 10 by H.D. Campbell. Former investigative reporter Mark Alexander thought his life hit a slump when a mass shooting results in the murder of a controversial news anchor. Can Mark get out of his head long enough to crack this case? Well, I'm not going to tell you. You'll have to get your own copy of Late Murder at 10 on Amazon.com and coming soon to your favorite bookstore.
I know that, Samantha, your story pulls from your culture too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have written this story if I hadn't been raised a Jewish kid. You know?
I definitely think that, and I agree with Alicia in terms of the anthology being something that I wanted to not just be focused on African Americans, because I felt that the African diaspora is so huge. And that those stories, there had to be other stories, right? There has to be more than just our, and again, Black folks aren't a monolith, so we're not monolithic. So I wanted all kinds of stories from all over.
You got more than what you bargained for.
I didn't get quite as many stories from outside the U.S. as I wanted, but I did get some really good ones. So that was really good. And if we do a volume 2, then that's going to only be from outside the U.S. So, but it depends on how well this one does.
I don't mean to sound demanding, but you're going to have a volume 2 after this show. You're going to have to. I'm sorry.
I think that a lot of us, you know, our backgrounds are so layered. You know, our family. Also, we go back. You know, my mom back when we were children, before there were DNA, tests, she had gone back into slavery, the people, I mean, we can trace our family all the way back in, and we know, where they came from, like the names and stuff that, people have, trace them back. I have an aunt who's a, Santeria, and, we grew up with that, so you just got, all these things, and I mean, you have to, my mom's family, my mother's last name for her married name is Goodman. And the people in her family, you look at the Goodmans, and, when they get kind of old, you see pictures and you say, who's that old white lady? Oh, I'm sorry, that's Aunt Maddie. So, we have all of this in our backgrounds. I think there's very few people, I think, in the United States who are African American who can say that they are one thing. I mean, it's very rare.
Yeah, we're all that's a joke, that running joke for me and my family. It's like
Very
we got 8% British Irish.
Yeah, it's really rare.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you find someone that can say I'm 100%, because most of us aren't, and we are that hybrid. We have our African roots and our Western European culture, and which makes those of us who are African American, and then Africans who are from the Americas generally. I got people who, my black friends from Panama, and those who are from Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, all those individuals, who are still in the Americas, and who have their roots also in the slave trade, the Middle Passage. So we have not just like African Americans, those of us who are here in the continent of the United States, but Africans in the Americas, in the larger, broader sense of being African American. And these things that, we have not, previous to this time, really been able to explore the way that we do now, because we have the means, especially internet, research, to outreach, with each other. And so, I mean, this is truly a renaissance. We don't really realize it right now, but, in the next generation, they'll look back and think, oh my gosh, everything changed. Everything changed.
Just to piggyback on what Penelope is saying, I also think that, like, to be a black girl right now, like, look what you get. You get Shiri, you get like all this, like, rich. I had to hunt. And I know Alicia is probably like, yeah, I had to hunt to try to find representation. When I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s. So it was a trek, right? But to be a black girl now, to be a dark-skinned black girl now, whoa.
It's unimaginable. And I think I'm older, or a little bit older than Nicole and Alicia. And I mean, I had to identify with like Valerie from Josie and the Pussycats.
Yes.
Until I got to see Uhura. I mean, like, seriously, I'm 52, and there was the landscape was so barren for so long. Yes. And so that's where, like, that level of imagination of inserting yourself into stories, became such an important thing. But yeah, to be growing up today, it's like a cornucopia. I mean, definitely things, it can get a lot better, but it's like there's so many places where black girls and girls of color can get affirmed in ways that they just couldn't before.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody else had this experience, but I identified with dark-haired white girls. Because
that's the closest you can get, right?
Yeah, that's as close as I can get. I was like, she's got dark hair, man.
I definitely think that I was often wonder how my identity would have been shaped had I had those models and representation touch points the way that we have them now.
So now?
If I had known about Hidden Figures and Katherine Johnson, I might not have gone to law school. I may have, gone ahead and stayed, worked in the sciences had I known that was a possibility. I'm not kidding. I mean, when I found out about that, I thought, well, there was a path. No one told us that there had been a path. It had already been blazed, but it was just basically like, covered over. We never knew about it. And I really did. I said, man, if I had only known, I would have stuck it out, I think.
But see, the problem is, this is why they need to modify Black history, Because all we hear about are the Rosa Parks and Shirley Chisholms. But
Right.
no, we didn't hear about the Katherine Johnsons.
Right.
No, we did not.
Right. So, do you have any questions about SLAY? I mean, this is great conversation, and I really love it. I want to know. Let me ask you. Can I ask a question? Can I ask the further?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So, I want to know from your experience, what are you the most excited about in terms of like the anthology? Like, you all got proofs, so you should have copies of all the stories. But what are you most looking forward to? Anything?
Well, for me, and I mean, I said it, I think in the response to Milton's 11 questions, one of the questions he asked, and the thing that gets me is that I like the fact, and you were saying the same thing, Henry, that everybody is given the same assignment, right? Go write a vampire story. And everybody comes back with something completely different. That's what I like. I mean, and I like that with any type of anthology where, you know, it's a themed anthology. This is the theme. I mean, I saw it like, remember that show Project Greenlight, where they had that part where they would give everybody just some lines, right? And you had to make a short film. And everyone was given exactly the same lines, right? And everyone's films were completely different. No film was like anyone else's film. All the lines were exactly the same. No one did the same film at all, not even close. And I love that because it just shows how the human mind works. So that's what I like the most about the SLAY anthology, that we're going to get what different people glean from this one topic, just saying, bring me your vampire. And everyone's is different.
Well, and I know that many of us have been published in numerous anthologies, and, you know, sometimes you get your author's copy and, you know, you read a story or two, but the anthology is really uneven, right? And that's not going to be the case at all with SLAY. Like it is just like, I want to block out time because I want to read all the stories. So I'm looking forward to also learning as a writer, reading other amazing writers, learning the craft that goes into, and reminding myself of the craft of short fiction. So that, and like, you know, the multitude of, as Penelope was saying, how people interpreted the prompt. I think just that's going to be just really exciting, and feeling really confident about going out and promoting the anthology, and also hearing new voices. I know you have a mix of established writers as well as some new and emerging voices. It's really exciting.
I know I was looking forward to reading this one from the moment I heard about it. And now that I've got my copy, that's what I'm doing. You know, I'm hanging up on this meeting in a minute and reading everybody else's story. Because I proofed mine this morning. Looks great. Thank you. Yeah. But I've been so anxious as I've participated in the interviews and our Facebook group where we talk to each other about how to get some attention for this anthology. The more I hear about everybody's stories, the more I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I am in this company. Is so exciting. And yeah, I guess as a reader, what I want the most is surprise. I want something I haven't already read. And you know what? I'm almost 50 and I've read a lot. So I'm harder to surprise than I used to be. And that's the exciting thing, is I'm thinking I'm going to be surprised about 28 times. Well, maybe 27, because I know
just one of them's yours.
Yeah.
I think what's exciting for me is I just love this variety, the diverse in the stories. But you know what? I'm ready to take some. I can't curse. What I really want, I want to overrate. But so I want this anthology to be a USA Today best-selling book, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're ready to see it. Right? Yes. Need to recognize, right?
Yes.
That's what I'm looking for. And so I feel like these stories, I feel like the impact of them could be tremendous.
Could be.
And so that's what I'm excited about.
Could be. So I didn't tell you guys, but one of the perks for our Indiegogo was that we would do obituaries for people. All right. So one of the things that we had 5 people say, okay, hey, do an obituary for us. And we were going to put them in between stories. And one of the things I did was I had an artist illuminate those obituaries. And they are fabulous. So there are 5 pieces of unique art throughout SLAY. And they are brilliant. Like they are, I can't wait for you guys. They're not in the proofs, I don't think. They might be in the proofs, but no, they are in the proofs. So when you're looking through your proofs, the artwork is in there. Don't be surprised. They have nothing to do with your story. They're just arbitrary obituaries for people who like back. They're like customized, original. I wrote them, original obituaries. And the artwork, they're illuminated like medieval style illuminated text. And they're like, it's so good. I was like, oh my gosh, this would be worth the price of the text by itself. And I can't wait for you guys to see them because Ben did an amazing job. So
I want to say this really quick. I'm sorry, but
no, you're fine.
I love unique stories, but what's so interesting is I'm a huge Neil Gaiman fan. I don't know if you guys know.
Yeah, we know.
Come on. Of course.
We know who Neil Gaiman is.
You guys have actually surpassed the whole Neil Gaiman thing, because I've been thinking, because the thing about it is, he is so over everywhere. Now, you guys have his anthologies is just so everywhere with just vampires. You see what I'm saying? So,
yes, we needed to be everywhere.
Yeah, if we could get a quarter of that from Neil Gaiman, we would take it. I mean,
seriously.
Yes. Nuh-uh, Michelle, I want half.
You're gonna have. That's right.
Alicia's like, I'm gonna shoot for 50%. Just
that's 50%. Right. We affirm that.
I mean, you guys are just so wonderful. So, what is the name of the anthology?
The name of the anthology is SLAY: Stories of the Vampire Noir.
All right, and it's not out yet. So, when are you guys expecting it?
The release date is October 13th, but you can pre-order it on Amazon now.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that the Kindle version is up for pre-order, but it will be available in paperback and hardcover.
Awesome. So how can we get to know each of you ladies? You guys have websites or?
Yes.
Talk to you guys or
right. Okay, so you can find me at mochamemoirspress.com or at NicoleGivensKurtz.net, and you can find all my social media links from there.
Awesome.
And I'm at Michele, and that's 1LMICHELE, Berger, BERGER.wordpress.com. I also run a very popular blog called The Practice of Creativity. So if there are any writers out there listening, come visit me there, and you can find some of my other social media contacts there too.
All right. Anyone else?
My website is www.aliciamccalla.com, where I talk about all things Black sci-fi and fantasy, lots of fun, superheroes. And I also have a podcast called Diverse Sci-Fi and Fantasy Stories, where I highlight some of my own stories and other authors.
Awesome. Samantha?
My name is also my website, SamanthaBryant.com. You can find my blog called Balancing Act, where mostly I talk about trying to squeeze everything out of every moment. And if you are into pictures of mushrooms and flowers and such, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Samantha B. Writer, just the letter B in the middle. And other than that, I'd say just Google me. Make sure you put author, because otherwise you get Colin Hanks' wife, and I don't look the same in a ballroom as she does.
I got you. I understand. Penelope?
You can find me at PenelopeFlynn.com. If you're really into Renfields, you can also, when you get into that, Renfields.us, where you'll find both of them will be literature and artwork, because I do 3D illustrations. And Saturday nights, 9 o'clock Eastern time, where I do a podcast on TalkShoe, which is discussions from the Otherhood. It's myself, my crew, Otto, Cranston, Bernie, James Goodrich, and we talk about everything regarding Black and people of color with regard to entertainment, science fiction, fantasy, all speculative fiction throughout the media and whatever's going on currently. And that's what we do every Saturday night at 9 o'clock Eastern, going to like 10 or 11 or whenever it is that we stop. So join us at Discussions from the Otherhood, and that's great fun. And I'm on Instagram at Penelope J. Flynn, Twitter, same thing, Penelope J. Flynn, and Facebook, Penelope Flynn Media, as opposed to just Penelope Flynn, which is my personal Facebook. Penelope Flynn Media is where you find the writing stuff.
Awesome, awesome. Now, I really enjoyed talking to you guys, but here's why I give all you guys the final word, whatever you want to say, shout outs, advice, whatever you want to talk about, the floor is yours.
I'll start with me and go down and let Nicole finish it out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I would say with regard to the anthology, pick it up. If you say, I don't like horror, or I don't like, I feel uncomfortable, because it's a Black anthology, it's like, keep an open mind. These are a lot of times stories in a way that you have never conceived of a story being told about vampires. So don't get caught into, the concept that we're going to just be reading Dracula, or it's, going to be, so just running around staking people, or we have people who have really, as I said, the whole point, rethought the genre and what it means to be a vampire or not, or a slayer or not. So I would say just keep an open mind, pick it up, read it. You may find something in those pages that resonates with you.
I can go next, following up on Penelope. So assuming you do read it, please share it. Please write a review. All authors are bound to some degree by algorithms on Amazon and Goodreads. Take a picture of it, put it on Instagram. So help this collective effort to get out, to have more people know about it. So please review it and share it, and help us get into the hands of lots and lots of people.
You want to go, Samantha?
I think I was going to say pretty much what Michele said. Read the dang book, people. This is full of so much good stuff, and this is your chance to find your new favorite author, because in an anthology, you can read a little bit by somebody, and then you get to find out, oh my gosh, I need to read everything this person has written. It's a great opportunity to find your new favorite author.
Yes, I would concur. I think for me, it's very important right now to use those dollars that you have as a form of social activism and let the world know that you want different, that you want to try different, that you want to hear the others. You know what I'm saying? I think that's important. So just buy it, spend your hard-earned dollars, review it, share it, and insist that you see this representation that we're sharing here.
So I concur with what everyone else said, but I think it's really important too that people of color also purchase this and be able to see Black protagonists in heroic roles, because that helps normalize it. And it helps be able to see stories out where you're not the main character. Is good for everyone. So even though this anthology is like Black vampires, Black slayers, it's great for Black people to see that, but it's also great for non-people of color to also see that, because it reinforces the normalcy that there are such things as Black vampires in speculative fiction. Here's how that might work out. There are Black slayers. Here's how that may work out. And be able to see these 28 stories, examples of how that could look, and normalize Black women and Black protagonists in horror. So that hasn't happened quite yet, but this is a step towards that. And so I think in conjunction with all the things that were said before, this is one of those things that I feel like, and it's the first of its kind. There's a collection like this, so definitely worth purchasing and worth sharing and worth reviewing and worth promoting amongst your friends who like vampires, amongst your goth friends who like vampires, amongst your grandmother who like Dark Shadow.
Yeah, yeah. I did want to say that. I was like, nobody mentioned Barnaby, right?
Or your friends who liked Blade, but so again, it's an excellent work. And I'm not just saying that just because I edited, but it really is a very diverse work. I think it would be challenging to find a story in SLAY one story that doesn't apply, that you don't love. Like, I think everyone could be able to find at least 3 to 5 stories that they will enjoy out of that 28, if not more.
Okay, awesome. I want to thank you, ladies,